Boardroom Bound, Episode 86, Why You Need Women on Your Board, with Olga Mack.
When I started my advocacy, I was very open and sober about that it takes more than one person to change the way we recruit board directors. My goal was to take the world from point A to point B, and then I trusted that other organizations will take it from point B to point Z.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Boardroom Bound. My name is Alexander Lowry, and this is the podcast dedicated to intentional leadership in the boardroom. My goal is to give aspiring and existing directors the tips, tactics, and strategies necessary to transform your confidence and build a successful career as a board director. Quick reminder, you can get all of today's show notes at podcast.gordon.edu. And in today's episode, we're speaking with Olga Mack. Olga was someone who is at the forefront, the front lines of advocating for change in the boardroom. So way before it was cool to talk about, say, getting more women in the boardroom space, she was there. She has an organization that was pushing the Fortune 500 companies that didn't have any females to consider adding a female, and moved, I think, from about 25 organizations that didn't down to 10 from her personal work. She was also instrumental in California's SB 826, which changed the regulations in the state that you needed to add a female onto your board. And she learned a lot about boardroom space and advocacy and had an amazing network, and took all of that knowledge and information and put it into a book called Get on Board, Earning Your Ticket to a Corporate Board Seat. There's a lot for us to unpack today. Wonderful, actionable advice you can take forward in your board journey. Let's jump into the show. Olga Mack, welcome to the Boardroom Bound podcast.
Hi, it's great to be here.
Well, I'm excited this happened. World circumstances, as we all know, the world has changed a lot, have forced this show to be moved a little bit. So delighted to have you virtually with us today to be talking about it. And this all stemmed from what a small world it is. When Nancy Shepard was on our show previously, we had a fabulous episode, and she and I were talking about different people. She said, well, you must have Olga. Your audience is going to benefit from her time today. So I'm sure your ears were ringing from that. And now we finally have the chance to share you with our audience today. So delighted to have you here today.
Thank you, and likewise. And I'm a huge fan of Nancy. She was a contributor to my book, Get on Board, Earning a Ticket to a Corporate Board Seat. She's definitely a wealth of knowledge and experience, and I had so much fun collaborating with her. So I'm glad you met, and I'm glad that we met after that.
Well, before we get into the great content, which is what I'm so eager to do, I want to make sure our audience understands your background and experience, because you are sort of, let's call it, a governance guru. That's what we'll talk about. Your book has some amazing knowledge, but you had to have a lot of life experiences to get there. You had to be working in the C-suite. You had to have been the general counsel. Sort of talk us through maybe the way your career started and how you got to the place you're in today, where you're so invested in the boardroom.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely know that story very well and can share it with your audience. I am what you would call a tech lawyer by design. I grew up in Silicon Valley and San Francisco Bay Area, and I went to law school to be a tech lawyer because I've seen the impact of technology on our lives, and I wanted to be part of shaping how it happens and how we can do it better. And so throughout my career, I've done a couple of things, and have worked at big law firms, worked at Fortune 500 companies, and then at some point have joined numerous startups as a number 2 lawyer, helping the company to go public, as a number 1 lawyer, general counsel, to lead through acquisition. And over time, my career has progressed on the business side as an executive until about 8-9 months ago. I joined a company called ParleyPro, which is a leader in contract lifecycle management platform. It's highly collaborative, easy to use, modern CLM tool. And I joined this company as the CEO about 9 months ago. In addition to my executive career, I have been very passionate about women in leadership, and especially women on corporate boards. And when I became a general counsel, I found myself in a position to advocate for more diversity of thought and a representation of women in leadership and corporate boards. I specifically started a campaign asking the 25 Fortune 500 companies that did not have a single woman on their corporate board at the time to be more inclusive and open-minded. And I've been able to convince about 15 of them to discover a woman, and sometimes two, and sometimes a woman of color. As I wanted to scale my efforts, I asked myself, how do you scale justice? And this is when I realized that being a lawyer helps. And the way you scale justice is by changing laws. And so I became an advocate of SB 826, which is a law in California that requires companies doing business in California, public companies, to have a certain number of women on their corporate boards. I've been part of drafting, testifying, and encouraging the governor to sign SB 826. As I was doing it, many people, many professional men and women have reached out to me and asked how they can make their board journey more attainable. And I found myself answering the same questions many times over. Mm-hmm. At the point, I sat down and I wrote down all the questions. I wrote down all the answers, got in touch with my friends who are directors, asked for various papers they use to obtain their positions, and have put together a self-published book, which during my work on SB 26 been discovered by a New York publisher, and that book was reformatted, cleaned, and my authentic typos have been eliminated, and has been published by a New York publisher. So have been in leadership, absolutely have passion for diversity of thought in leadership, especially boards, and have had a few adventures in the boardroom and in advocacy for more diversity in the boardroom.
So there was a lot there, and I would love to unpack some of that. And why don't we just start with something that's ripped from the headlines, the California SB 826, which I'm going to say is going to change things in amazing ways, and good stuff is really going to come from this. But in some ways, I'm sad that we needed that. I really kind of wish that things had moved without that. And I wonder if sometimes when I think about Congress, like they're oftentimes they have really good intent behind something, and the way things come out, sometimes it's convoluted, it's misunderstood, it doesn't necessarily work the right way. I would love to hear your take on what you'd originally envisioned what the law was going to do, and whether the final version met that in its entirety. Maybe it didn't go all the way. What are your thoughts on what you actually saw implemented?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there are lots of questions. So, and maybe in full disclosure, I initially did not start in a place where I would support what's known as quotas. In fact, I was really worried about the impact of quotas and how women would be perceived. And so I really was not an eager advocate of quotas to begin with. I have found myself during advocacy that it would just take forever to get to where I would like the world to go. And I just did not see it being able to accomplish that in my lifetime. And so after trying to do various things and realizing that it was not scaling as quickly as I would like, I would say that SB 26 has been sort of a last resort effort. With respect to the law itself, it is a very good first step. It definitely can be improved. But as a first step, especially given how controversial it was, and I think it's a great first step. As a testament to it being a great first step, I guess we see quite a lot of things have been changing. Because of this law, numerous big companies and big organizations have started efforts that are much more visible and intentional to increasing diversity of thought in various boards, public and private. And as a testament to it being a great first step, we also see other states following the lead and highly considering similar legislations. So no, not a perfect law. There is no such a thing as a perfect law, probably. but most definitely a fantastic first step that has an impact and has most importantly changed the lives and dreams of many professional women.
And I'd love if we could take that into a little bit more depth, because I've heard from Cheryl Batchelor, for example, who's been on our podcast before, shared with me about what it's like to be the first woman in a boardroom. And it's a very different experience, she said, than if you're, say, third or fourth, because you've got a bit of a tipping point, cultures start to shift. She talked to me, she said, I'm the first woman in a boardroom, and suddenly there's no more martinis at lunch, and other sort of behaviors that you would think would not be normal if there's, say, parity on the board were just normal. That's the way it had been for a long time. And I wonder if you've gotten some feedback from people that have joined boards as a result of this and heard some of those sorts of experiences, and maybe some of the boards have moved quickly and added multiple women versus just added one. Any thoughts about how this is growing and changing things?
Yeah, I think it's while hard to be the first, it is also a privilege with a great responsibility to be a pioneer. So you absolutely hear from women who are the first and the only member of the board that they are part of building the new culture, and they're part of the awkwardness of transitioning from old to new. Again, you kind of have to take the opportunity for what it is, and you have to be the right candidate to make sure that you can lead and help the company to embrace a new direction. Again, not for everyone, but if you are interviewing for your first board position and you are the very first woman or a person of color or whatever other category that you may represent on that board, I think you have to very much be open to embracing being uncomfortable and being part of a slightly awkward situation where you have to help the organization to discover a new identity and embrace a new culture. Having said that, you also see that many boards are very much aware that a token woman or a token person of color or token anything is really not the 21st century way of leading companies. And so you see many companies very actively thinking through how they can diversify thoughts on their corporate boards and how they can serve the organization better in the process. So if it's any time good to be a pioneer in the first, now is a good time, because there's a lot of discussion and a lot of action about changes and how to serve the shareholders better and how to increase representation in all levels of leadership, including the corporate board.
And, I think I've had two experiences in my life that give me a little hint. And I realize it's not the same thing, but the first major board I walked into was Pale, Male, and Stale. I was the diversity by being 30, 40 years younger than most of the other board members. It wasn't really uncomfortable per se. And then a different experience very recently, I think I'm the first male to ever chair one of 2020 Women on Boards annual events, and I'll be leading the Boston effort, which I'm very proud of. But when we did the Global Chairs call, I was definitely the only man in that room, and it was a fun joke on the virtual Zoom call. And it was really interesting for me to sit there and go, wow, I guess this is maybe a sense of what it might feel like to walk in on the other side. So it's great to see all of these wonderful different organizations making great progress, changing things, because that's good for organizations to have people of different thought. I think you need that diversity of thought to innovate. And if we sort of use this, as you probably expanded your network exponentially just by the fact that you're doing this and talking to all of these people, I imagine a lot of that additional information was part of what helped you build the book for getting on the board. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you for putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation and being whitened male in the room, I guess, in the virtual room, who are women. But you're absolutely right. And that's why, with respect to advocacy, people often ask me, what is one skill that I think every professional should have? And I, by far, not only because I'm an attorney, but by far I think that advocacy is the most underrated skill a professional should have, because when in every position we hold, in every situation we find ourselves in, there's always an opportunity to do the right thing, and there's always an opportunity to advocate for people who are not at the table. And many people, majority professionals, are far better at advocating for others than for themselves. And if they can channel the thoughts and the enthusiasm for doing the right thing through advocacy for others, they can absolutely change the world and have a huge impact. And in the process, I think, as you alluded, and this is what I found myself during my advocacy, is that it completely changed my outlook, it completely changed my network, and it completely changed my opportunities. So advocacy is a really great skill for having impact and in the process completely to transform your life.
That's a really interesting point. And let's run with that for a second, because when we often talk on this show about you want to become a board member, how do you go and do that? And to some extent, you have to be your own best advocate to arm others to become champions for you, because that's probably the networking part that's going to open some doors for yourself. And it was interesting when I was thinking about the book coming in today, in my mind, it's really a practical beginner's guide for someone who wants to be a board director. In my mind, you're demystifying the process, you're breaking down the steps, you're answering the common questions, you're giving actionable strategies. In some ways, I think you're preparing people to advocate for themselves. And I wonder if the way we compare these two statements is, I don't know if you want to say like a pay it forward approach, or it's sort of like a give and take model. How would you reconcile those two?
Absolutely. It's, there's really no difference between advocating for yourself and advocating for others. It is really just reframing the challenges in front of you, and I find that it's just much easier for professionals to advocate for others. When we tend to focus on advocating for ourselves, we become all sensitive. We worry about perceptions. We over-edit, over-analyze, and sometimes the message never gets out. When we advocate for others, it's far easier to do the right thing, and far easier to be strategic about it. And as I said, the big outcome of advocating for others is that you're also in the process lifting your profile and change your network and eventually advocate for yourself. But yes, with respect to the book, I found that many professionals thought and still think about corporate board journey as this mysterious process, like as if an invisible hand stirs things up and pulls out somebody who's lucky enough to have a seat at the table. And what I found through numerous interviews of various directors, of various CEOs, of various chairpersons who tend to be a lot chairmen, that this is not a mysterious process. It's really much more intentional process. You find that professionals who are invited in a boardroom, whether it's an executive position or director position, they're much more intentional. They have a sort of a long-term plan in mind. They think of how to position themselves for those opportunities. They polish what it is that they bring to the table and why a very specific profile of a board would benefit from their service. And then they very intentionally network and become visible to make sure that they're discovered. And this process, just like everything in life, just like everything in the professional life, is not a month or two process. For even very experienced professionals who are highly qualified, it takes at least 1 year, and on average at least 3 to 5. So it's a journey, and it is not a mystical journey. It's not similar to a constellation event where stars have to align. It is an intentional journey that professional takes over a period of time. And what I find very exciting after the passage of SB 826 is that now we see a new generation of professionals who graduate from college, who graduate from professional schools, and who are asking a question of, I eventually would like to serve on the corporate board. What do I do today to help myself to be propelled forward? And that's an outcome of having a law such as SB 826. It inspired women, people of color, various professionals to really put board service on the roadmap of their professional development. And that's probably the most exciting part of SB 826.
That's a very good point. And I'd love to talk about something that's a little bit tangential to this, but one of the changes that I'm seeing in a boardroom is if we look back, decades ago, it was sitting and retired CEOs. And eventually you might have added sitting and retired CFOs, but it was generally very, very experienced, if we'd say that in a nice way. You are now seeing superstars get plucked at a very young age up into boards, right? You're seeing people even in young 30s now on landing major roles. Like I can think of Coca-Cola and several other companies that grab some superstars up, often for a specific skill set. It might be sort of a cyber tech type person, marketing social media. We're starting to see some chief HR officers, et cetera. I imagine that in some ways is related to what you're saying with the law passing, because that changed the mindsets of companies that we can and maybe should do things differently. Do you have any thoughts around this?
Yes, absolutely. Even though I consider myself advocate for women, when I discuss board service, especially as a former general counsel who've been very actively thinking about who should be on various boards of the companies I lead, I think about diversity of thought. And what I really think about is skills. And when you talk to people, either general counsel or CEOs or chairpersons, as they're thinking what their board should look like today versus tomorrow versus 5 years from now versus 10 years from now, you increasingly have a much more sophisticated discussions about skills and what a board member will bring to the table. So you increasingly see essentially what I call a skill matrix to be drawn for every board member who sits on the board today, and what skills the companies will need to be successful in the future. And so the board service has been transforming, and I'm really excited about this change in a number of ways. One, as you just alluded, we've been moving away from former title, like being the CEO of the company, instantly qualifying you to sit on the board. And that's a major shift. Another thing that we're also seeing is that companies realize that the needs of a company may be changing over time, and the board composition has to reflect that. So we're increasingly having conversations that are much needed about the term of service and that it has a limited duration. And having discussions around term, one, focuses everybody on skills. And two, if you don't have an appointment for life, so to speak, you have opportunities to bring new talents and new skills into the boardroom that is much needed for the company at the time. I do agree with you that the average, especially in the Fortune 500 companies, the average age of a board member, is pretty high. And it used to be that board service used to be really a retirement plan for executives. They received a relatively light workload for relatively good pay, and if they had a portfolio of companies that they sit on, it's essentially a retirement plan. We're moving away from that notion. We see members of the board being much more active. It's not just a ceremonial role. Increasingly, it is a much more demanding role that requires engagement, and not just quarterly, but quite much more often. It is also a much more complicated world, both in terms of skills and external events that are happening, including things like COVID. So our expectations of boards, their engagement and qualifications are much higher. And so the companies are having different expectations, and they're also realizing that diversity of thought, including age, is very critical because, while you see, many companies, for example, Coca-Cola and Starbucks is another company that has, younger members of the board serving it, they realize that a big constituency, a big customer group is of a younger age. And so it is, one, useful to have certain skills that are correlated with age, for example, as you said, social media, but it is also useful to have, consumers of your products to be represented at the board level so that company can, at a very highest level, strike the right tone and have a correct direction. So there are multiple reasons to have diversity of thought, which gender is just one of many. I like to see age and race and various other ways to represent in the boardroom, just because that's what a modern boardroom leadership requires.
Yep. Some of the others that come to mind, sort of international experience, right? Something that you and I both would talk about. It changes your perspective around the world and the way you see things. And you think about large global companies, you wouldn't necessarily want them just pale, male, and stale. It doesn't look like the people that you're perhaps interacting with or the customers that you're serving. So I totally agree on that. And, I'd also love just to talk a little bit about the organization you started, the Women Serve on Boards movement. Clearly built all of these things together, right? There's a lot of stuff brewing together, but how's that going so far?
It's been doing great. When I started my advocacy, I was very open and sober about that it takes more than one person to change the way we recruit board directors. My goal was to take the world from point A to point B, and then I trusted that other organizations will take it from point B to point Z. And that's kind of what Women Serve on Board has been. It has been an opportunity for me to, as I said, advocate and encourage Fortune 500 companies to find their first woman. And when I was doing it, and I was doing it way before it was cool, I was one of those odd people who was running around proverbial internet and asking people to support me. And it was well before SB 26. It was well before the cultural shift. And then after SB 26, I've seen the cultural shift, and I have not changed, but the world has changed. And in my lifetime, I've been able to transform from, somebody who challenges status quo, somebody who may seem a little sort of on the crazy side, to somebody who become normal. And I've had a pleasure of seeing CEO after CEO adopt the beliefs and what I've been advocating. And so Women Serve on Board has been that platform for me to change the baseline of our values and our expectations. And at this point, I often speak about the book. I answer a lot of questions to professionals to help them, one, discover what is the board opportunity that is good for them, and how to continue on their journey and how to make it a reality. And at this time, it pleases me every time when I open the news, yet another CEO, yet another big organization to embrace the diversity of thought and leadership, and I happily support it. It just warms my heart that I've been able to see the baseline shift in my lifetime, and I absolutely think that changing laws was a huge part of that.
Well, thank you for all of your efforts, and delighted with you that it is paying off and we're moving in the right direction. And companies in general, I think, will be able to change a lot after this. The crisis, I would say, never waste a crisis, right? This is a reason that we can make some changes, or some good changes that will come out of this. Thank you for all of your hard work doing it. And I appreciate you sharing with us today your insights, all the background and experience. It was great to hear from someone who's been at the front line and at the forefront of a lot of this adjustment that we need to see making. So we appreciate your insights and helping all of us to be boardroom bound.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and I really enjoyed this experience.
That's it for this episode of Boardroom Bound. I really enjoyed chatting with Olga Mack. Most of us have heard a lot about the changing landscape, many of it being compelled by the California SB 826, and really good intentions behind it. Olga was very involved, and she's been involved from before that in trying to help some of the leading companies in the world think through why diversity of thought in the boardroom is so important. Great to hear her story, and have a lot of advice that she's learned along the way that she's passed on to us in this episode and from her book. Now remember, if you head over to podcast.gordon.edu, you'll find links to everything we discussed today. And please know that the Boardroom Bound team and I are so proud to be your go-to podcast for all things that connect, prepare, and empower you to land a board seat. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you'll miss any of the high-quality content that we're bringing to you every Wednesday. Thanks for joining me today. I can't wait to share more stories and strategies from brilliant business minds with you again next week. Remember to keep tuning in to be Boardroom Bound.